Good evening, your favorite non-VTuber Fratanga here, and I'm going to put that in emphasis, non-VTuber. I don't exactly want to be lumped in with whatever the hell those things are. I've already been told to open up a GoFundMe page to make it possible, but I refuse. But, you know, if this video gets 3,000 likes, maybe we'll talk about it. Somebody's already given me 100 in super chats on the last video. We'll see. We'll see. But you know how I am here at Fratanga Plays. I don't give you the bare minimum. If I'm gonna do a VTube model, I'm gonna go all out with it. It'll be very impressive. But not that you deserve it, because you guys keep harassing me with Xbox better. Well, either way, let's focus on dear old PlayStation, because in spite of the record-breaking success and 75 million console units sold, you can't deny it has been the most underwhelming PS5 gen so far. That could change in the last years of the console's lifespan, which is what I'm betting on, but goddamn, 5 years in is a pretty long time. And within those 5 years, Sony has been struggling, a bit of an identity crisis. Their first-party IPs are not coming out fast enough, and by the time they do arrive, other single-player multi-plat games are outshining them, outselling them, and knowing you don't even need a PS5 to play them hasn't exactly made the brand seem more enticing. As we speak, Monster Hunter Wilds moved more PlayStation units than any single one of their first-party games. This is why I strictly remain a PC gamer and solely a PC gamer. If I were to have a PlayStation, there's no Stalker 2 over there, and if I were to have an Xbox, there's no Black Myth Wukong over there. But if I have a PC, not only do I have both day one, but I have the best versions, on top of the thousands upon thousands of games that just don't come to consoles at all. It's why, in spite of rising GPU prices, more and more people are making the switch to PC than ever before. And here's the thing about that, Xbox guys have just kind of accepted that as reality. But when it comes to the PlayStation guys, they've been violently fighting it off like they were just pulled in by a riptide. Their fate was sealed the minute they were pulled in, but they just refuse to let it pull them in and drown. And I do want to throw him something to help, but I'm one of those douchebags who's pulled out his phone and recorded the whole thing.
Oh, I got you, brother. Oh, no, you don't.
And legitimately, it is kind of sad to see what's become of the PlayStation brand. At this point, it's hard to deny that Jim Ryan and Herman Holst, two guys who I actually thought were doing great, but maybe that's because I'm biased due to the fact that they ported to PC and pushed for that. But when you see which titles they advocated for, their plans for the company, and the live service games that were gonna go with it, you begin to realize that, these two really screwed up. And the results of their fuck up has ended in mass layoffs and multiple project cancellations and studio shutdowns, quite possibly more than I've ever seen from Microsoft in the span of one console generation. PlayStation struck by more layoffs in the aftermath of multiple canceled PS5 games. Update: PlayStation Studios Malaysia also affected. Sony may be healthier than ever when it comes to its balance sheets, but the pursuit of more profits never truly goes away. Sadly, that's resulted in more job losses at PlayStation's acclaimed Visual Arts division, a first-party development group which provides motion capture, art, animation, and much more for its stable of studios. Most notably, it worked closely with Naughty Dog on its various The Last of Us projects. Kotaku reports that the job losses include some staff who worked on Ben Studios' recently canceled project, although a source told the site that the layoffs were more widespread than that. We'll update if we learn more. Update: it looks like Sony support team PlayStation Studios Malaysia has also been struck by layoffs, as reported by NMIA Gaming. The site claims approximately 18 staff have been let go, ranging from artists all the way through project managers. Apparently, staff were told the layoffs were not due to performance, but rather a reduction to the overall workforce. We'll check with Sony to try and get confirmation.
Bye, have a beautiful time.
Oh my God. Now, I really don't know if this is the results of Sony succeeding or Sony struggling, because oftentimes both outcomes lead to layoffs. That's how corporations are. Record high profits, let people go. Record low profits, let people go. Job security is a myth. Your hard work doesn't pay off.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Let us keep in mind this is not a Sony thing only. Mass layoffs have been going on for the entirety of this console generation, and they'll continue to happen. Workforces are a lot more expendable than you think, even if the people do a great job. I do have empathy towards them, but at the same time I recognize that they have a very impressive portfolio that'll get them a job elsewhere in the industry. But no matter where you go, you're not going to be appreciated. That's just how the industry is. Sony's poor decision making and their great decision making leads to you losing your job. Isn't that great? But there is something there, some information that really caught my attention that I don't think enough people are paying attention to. And it's this part: Visual Arts Division, a first-party development group, which provides motion capture, art, animation, and much more for its stable of studios. Most notably, pay attention to this, it worked closely with Naughty Dog on its various The Last of Us projects. Now, why does this mean so much for it? Because it wasn't soon after this statement, the very next day, that we got this statement from Neil Druckmann in an interview about the possibility of The Last of Us 3. I was waiting for this question, Druckmann said. I guess the only thing I would say is don't bet on there being more of The Last of Us. This could be it.
You say it like it's a bad thing.
Now let's bring these two statements up next to each other, and we can see that it seems clear as day some of these layoffs may be a result of a struggle behind the scenes with the company. And now it's starting to affect their first-party development studios like Naughty Dog. Resources seem to be scarce. And even though we got a preview of Intergalactic, let's be honest, it looks incredibly underwhelming next to things like Uncharted or The Last of Us. For me personally, I believe this is evidence that we're going to get more day-and-date titles arriving to PC, because it would seem not enough people are buying these games. Hence why Sony wanted to amp up their live service production. 11 titles that have thus far been canceled and the projects outright shut down, because it would seem Sony doesn't want another Concord on their hands, which financially bit them in the ass. The thing, however, is I don't understand why the live service titles are what's to blame and not Sony and their attempt at it. Success for live service games can be found just about everywhere, except for PlayStation. Many would say it was the wrong move for Sony to make, but I don't think that's the case. I think Sony, with its two leaders, Jim Ryan and Herman Hulst, were simply out of touch. With titles like Marvel Rivals, we know for a fact live service titles can succeed and generate record profits. The thing is, I do believe Sony can find success doing live service if it includes their first-party titles. But as we speak, The Last of Us Factions, canceled. The live service game Ben Studio was working on, canceled. The live service game Bluepoint was working on for God of War, canceled. Twisted Metal, canceled. Do you see the problem here? This many cancellations is quite worrisome, because as much as PlayStation fanboys tout single player, it's not paying the bills. It's clear as day Sony took a financial hit dropping a lot of these projects, because chances are they were investing in them for a few years. And another problem that arises is the very fact that Sony has outright advertised projects that never were going to be released or ever even existed. And they've done that for 5 years now. And if they do come out and they fail, they shut the whole game down and fire the entire studio. How anybody can have confidence that PlayStation will provide them with content is beyond me.
And now, my dears, comes the climax of the evening.
Now, of course, I was seeking some wisdom. I need an intellectual powerhouse with sage advice. And who else can I turn to other than the best PlayStation fanboys have to offer? Nib. He will be able to make sense of all of this, right? No, of course not. Not a peep from him. Silent during the matter. Because as PlayStation is having this crisis, his goal is to, well, ignore it, and that's really disappointing. I'm tired of Reforge Gaming defending it, and as much as we respect these two logicians, I'd rather read a Nib essay. But there was none. No defense and no criticism. So I decided to create an alter ego known as Fib, because god damn it, I need Nib to come with his AI to defend this, but instead he chooses to ignore it. So, with a little help from ChatGPT and my own creativity, I created a version of Nib that makes essays even longer. So please, without further ado, Fib, explain to us why this is good.
More PlayStation layoffs, but is the situation as dire as media pundits make it seem, or is this truly a telling sign of Sony struggling this generation? The answer may surprise you. Let's begin. Why the layoffs? Sony has sold over 75 million consoles, so logically it makes sense for them to keep all the money and put families on the streets. With all that money Sony makes, they could invest in another high-selling title like Astrobot, and less employees working for them is better, unlike Microsoft, who lays off people and has no money or games. Sony should keep laying off people. This opinion may be controversial, but as stats have shown, the more layoffs, the more people tweet about Sony, and it's good to have publicity, both negative or positive. Sony saved console gaming, so it's important they are talked about a lot, and more layoffs and cancelled games ensures we hear about them more. Concord is not to blame. Concord is not Sony's fault, and they don't deserve hate for it, unlike Redfall. Concord was Sony's brilliant risk into the live service model that would have been amazing, but gamers didn't support it. Sony doesn't need employees that hurt their brand image, and the developers didn't need to be paid. Sony needs to fire more people to show gamers trust. Unlike Xbox layoffs, Sony layoffs are bigger and better. Everything Sony does is better than Microsoft, we all know this, so naturally Sony needs to keep laying off more people until Xbox can't keep up. This ensures healthy competition and keeps Sony in check. We can't stop until Xbox Studios is completely empty. The media unfairly reports on Sony layoffs and marks them as bad guys, when in reality this benefits gamers and the industry. Biased sites like Digital Foundry continue to perpetuate the idea that Sony needs employees, but that's silly. The brand is so big it can absorb all logic and reasoning, and DF does not ever tell the truth about how much Sony does for the industry. 11 cancelled games are not to blame. It's good Sony relies on Xbox to provide content for their platform, so Sony can keep all their money. We need Sony to be rich in order to be right online about what we say. The media unfairly scrutinized Sony over cancelling big-named IPs in the last 5 years, but never mentions Xbox putting their games on PS5, and this bad faith reporting leads to fanboyism in the gaming sphere, which I am not a part of. Astrobot won Game of the Year, and that is more meaningful and impactful than cancelling games and mass layoffs, but the gaming outlets display obvious Xbox bias on a daily basis. It's one of the best-selling games ever, and for that reason it makes sense Sony is letting go of people. You can't share that money with employees, and they shouldn't get any of it.
All I asked the AI to do was to summarize a mini essay on how Nib would report on this subject, and it went balls deep. This is even better than what Nib could do, and longer. In fact, it's so long, the co-pilot's speech couldn't finish it. The best part being how long it took some people to find out that this was a parody account. The success was killing me. This, admittedly, is probably one of the funniest trolls I've done since Xbox Better, but the accuracy is astonishing, isn't it? So I said, why not? Let's whip up another one. I asked AI, hey, what would Nib say towards those 11 canceled games from PlayStation? How would he word it? And, well, this is what the AI said.
Why PlayStation cancelling 11 games is the best thing for consumers. Oh, what a joyous time to be a PlayStation fan. In a bold, forward-thinking move, PlayStation has made the incredibly generous decision to cancel 11 games, because who needs variety, innovation, or the thrill of new experiences? After all, the gaming world was clearly just drowning in too many options, and it's high time someone stepped in to save us from the overwhelming flood of content. Thank you, PlayStation, for looking out for our well-being. Let's start with the most obvious benefit. We no longer have to deal with the tedious task of deciding which games to play. Gone are the days when players had to carefully pick from a vast array of exciting titles. Now, PlayStation is graciously narrowing our choices, ensuring we only have to focus on the few, select games that will no doubt be the only things worth playing. The simple act of narrowing down the gaming universe to a few elite titles is such a blessing. Who doesn't love having their entire entertainment experience distilled down to a handful of handpicked masterpieces? And let's not forget about the economy. By cancelling all those games, PlayStation has saved us the trouble of spending money on titles we didn't really need. Why buy 11 different games when you can just buy a few select ones and call it a day? The idea of spending less on a variety of new experiences is totally overrated. Instead, we should all be grateful for the chance to cut down on our spending while still enjoying the same old game. After all, who needs fresh content when you can simply replay the same handful of games over and over? Truly a win for our wallets and our boredom. Now, let's talk about the developers. We all know how annoying it is when developers are given too much creative freedom. By cancelling these 11 projects, PlayStation is simply making sure these developers are not wasting their time on experimental or original ideas. We wouldn't want them to get too creative, right? It's much better that they focus solely on the tried and true franchises that we already know and love. Why bother with new concepts or exciting genres when sequels and remasters are always right around the corner? PlayStation is doing these developers a favor by curbing their artistic impulses. After all, who needs innovation when nostalgia is the name of the game? Of course, PlayStation's decision also speaks volumes about their commitment to quality. Why bother releasing 11 different games that might each have their own unique appeal when you can just cancel them all and streamline the process? With fewer games on the horizon, we can all rest easy knowing that PlayStation will now be focusing solely on perfecting the few titles that made the cut. No more worrying about the possibility of underwhelming releases. Now we can sit back and trust that PlayStation will only bless us with the finest, most polished games. Who needs quantity when you can have just a handful of masterpieces? In conclusion, PlayStation's decision to cancel 11 games is nothing short of genius. It's a move that demonstrates a deep understanding of what consumers really want: fewer options, fewer new experiences, and fewer chances for surprise. So, the next time someone complains about the lack of variety in PlayStation's lineup, just remind them how lucky we are to be spared the burden of choice. Truly, PlayStation has outdone itself by giving us exactly what we didn't know we didn't want. Bravo!
You think this is funny?
Is that really? Oh, is that really what AI thinks of Nib? Is that really what it sees and jots down when reading Nib tweets? I mean, oh my god. It's not too far off. It's not too far off. The thing is, Nib's essays are just a bit longer, maybe. Sometimes. But as you can imagine, the reactions towards this have just been the best. People love Fib over Nib. So much so that Nib has not actually tweeted out an essay for like 2 days now. I think his alter ego that I created may be getting to his head. I've been putting this Nib to practice, commenting essays on other people's tweets that are anti-PlayStation, and everybody reacts with, "Why are you typing a book?" And I think maybe that's why Nib shut up. He had to see other people's reactions from individuals that he respects. And once he sees their reactions to the essay-long version of his tweets, they ridicule him. Luckily for me, a lot of people caught on to the fact that, it's me. But there were some who were getting pretty pissed off, not realizing it was a giant joke at the expense of a dork. Sometimes the only way to get somebody to see how ridiculous what they do is to parody it. Nib and every other PlayStation fanboy knows there is no defense. And your previous attempts to look like an intellectual, breaking down all the information with these long paragraph/essays, makes you look like a dumbass. But who knew that it would take me making fun of him with a parody account to finally get him to realize that? So far, it's been a very underwhelming generation. Sony has not made me more confident in them as a publisher right now. It's going to take a lot of work to win back trust, just as much as it's going to take me several videos before I have the financing for a VTuber. So, if you want to be there when it happens, you need to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And especially like the video. That being said, I'll see you next video with an even better troll. Bye-bye.
Fritongo sucks ass.